So how you doing, my bro?
Oh, very good. This is a nice setup you got here. How long you been here?
We've been here about nearly 2 years now, just past 2 years. But this whole area that you've come in was production central for clothing. So
Oh,
this was
swear.
like Boohoo, man,
Yeah.
Boohoo, PLT, Pretty Little Thing.
What they've gone?
The whole industrial estate was literally
Yeah.
producing dresses. Was the biggest production site for all of these
Yeah.
companies and brands. And then the dispatches came out, or ITV dispatches, when they
Yeah.
obviously discovered some things that obviously
Some
weren't meant to be.
untoward practices.
Yeah, so unfortunately they closed down, and then I found this place, and I just had a vision to try and, because we've got a marketing agency as well, so we've got some offices in the back, and then we use the hub for renting the space out and obviously doing our own stuff, man.
Yeah, nice, a nice space. You got like what, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 8, loads of different
Yeah,
studios,
and
photography setups. It's good. If I was local, I might consider for the right price. Everything's got a price.
no, I know you're quite busy at the moment yourself with the pods and stuff.
Yeah, yeah.
But now, just before we start, just wanna thank you for coming down.
Come on, man.
Appreciate you on the MVP Vantage Season 1 podcast. We're here to celebrate your success.
Appreciate you, man. Come on, man. You already know to always pick up my bro Connell. I can't say no. When you said, it's
Always
Connell's family, I said, come on, man.
big K,
Connell, Frida,
I've,
that's my family for real, for
just
real.
before we start as well, I've got to tell you something about Connell, yeah? When I was about 16, 17, I went up to Dubs to see him. And my first kind of exposure into business or anything I got into, he introduced me to the Secret, the book, The Secret, and that's what kind of got me going. And we always kind of reason with each other, even though when he's in Dubs and I go over. But Connor's good stuff, man. Good people,
Yeah,
bro.
no, that's why it's just so important to listen, have the right people around you when you look at things like the importance of, like, just family and being around people that actually want to see you win. It is massive.
No, definitely. But before we get into the pod, I want to hit you with some for the record questions.
Yeah.
So I'm going to ask you some quick fire questions. What's one habit that made you a six-figure thinker?
Do you know what? I think it's just having ADHD. I'll just try and do everything at once. And it's like just not being afraid to just do everything and fail and just work on whatever actually works.
Okay. One red flag you spot in an investor within 30 seconds.
When they want to get involved in the project. I'm not having opinions from their auntie's cousin's sister's cat about what color we should paint the bathroom. Just let me be me and just let you bring the money and let me bring the product.
Best UK city for opportunity right now outside of London.
I was gonna say, I'm gonna say London. Outside of London. Do you know what it is? I'm so London focused. I've got my blinders on. I can't see anything outside of London. But if I was, I'd probably say Liverpool.
Bro, I swear to... I was just about to say that. I always bang on about Liverpool. I spend a lot of time up there. I've got a lot of close friends, especially in Toxteth, which is an area which generally a lot of the house prices and student accommodation is quite close to the city centre.
Look, I think for a lot of people, they're on the fence between, do they want capital appreciation, do they want yield? So for those that are not familiar, obviously capital appreciation is your property going up in value over time. Yield is the return you're making as an investment based on the money you've got in the property. Normally you have to pick one or the other. I think Liverpool's probably projected and has got the current market projections based off data to have a combination of really good yield along with good capital appreciation. So for people that are in like this for the long term and building portfolios, it's probably a really good place to focus.
Oh, that's great. What's more addictive, momentum or money?
Nah, I've never been addicted to money, so it's got to be momentum, perpetual motion. I'm a motion boy.
That's dope. If you quit property tomorrow, what would you be doing instead?
So I'm now getting on in age. So I'd be trying to focus on joining the Team GB senior paddle team.
Okay, I see you. You're going to play paddle after with the
Yeah, I
brother.
got my guy off camera. He's never played before, but he's convinced that from YouTube he's gonna be smoky. So we booked a game against some established players. So check back in afterwards to find out if we won or lost.
Okay, paddle's a big thing at the moment, man.
Listen,
I've been speaking to a lot of people especially up north, and in Leicester, and amount of people that are trying to get planning permission for paddle courts. Is that...
Yeah, no, look, paddle's massive. I mean, it's just supply and demand. At the moment, I can't remember the stats, but we've got, I think it's like 1 million people or hundreds of thousands of people playing paddle and less than 1,000 courts in the UK. If you compare that to somewhere like Spain that have like 10,000 courts, we're really underserved. So if you can get in early and be an early adopter, I think it's a great opportunity. That being said, there are some issues, particularly in London. One of the issues are that paddle courts are generally warehouses. Logistic companies can pay more for the same space than paddle places are because they make more money. So it's really hard to open and find the right spaces in London. Outside of London, you then the price per square foot that these companies will pay goes down. So it's more viable, but obviously the concentration of user isn't as high. So I think you're at a catch-22, but I think being an early adopter is still in a good place. And I've got a lot of friends that are making some good moves in the paddle space. I know there's a lot of exciting stuff to come.
That's very interesting. Flip or rent to rent?
Flip, man. Flip all day long.
Cash flow, capital gain?
Now, capital gains. I'm on the appreciation. I'm on my ascendancy era. I feel like the thing with cash flow is once you get to a point, you can very easily get to a point where you know what your expenses are. You know that you might need 5, 10, 20, 50,000 a month, whatever the case may be. Once you hit that, if you make more money, you're just going to spend more money. So I think if you want to really grow wealth rather than money, then capital appreciation is more important.
UK market or go global?
I've got some property outside of the UK, but I'm not actively trying to expand. So I'm going to have to say UK market for now.
And residential, commercial?
Residential. Commercial's cool. Like some of my best investments have been commercial, like just in terms of holding, in terms of yield. And the best thing about commercial, and you'll know this obviously from being a tenant or owning commercial property, is that as the landlord, nothing's your problem. Oh, the roof's leaking. Yeah, let me get you a quote and send you the invoice. Oh, something's happened. Yep, I still need to get paid. Let me send you the invoice. So if you're looking for a passive investment and you can get a good tenant with a good covenant or just a good tenant in general where there's high demand, I think for those who want hands-off investment, commercial can be really good.
And final question is, retire tomorrow or start again from zero?
No, retire tomorrow. Listen, let me tell you something. You see the way I love paddle right now? I could retire tomorrow anyway. Just say, look, you know what? I'm comfortable. I can live a comfortable life with where I'm at. Let me just go and play paddle, travel a little bit, and just enjoy life.
I think that's a question we ask most of our guests, well, all of our guests, and it's been a 50-50 answer. And a lot of people generally say, I still got a lot to give, but it's refreshing to hear. I'm not saying they're not being honest, but it's refreshing to hear that you're happy and you're content.
Should I tell you something? You know that there's two questions you asked there. The one along like how much do you love money? Like I've never loved money. Like I was the guy, like again, I just shout at my people and like Elliot will tell you, like he used to look at me like, bro, what's wrong with you? You make good money. Every day you wear the same hat, the same chinos from H&M, the same hoodie, the same everything. Like spend some money, like buy this. He was buying Rolexes, this, that. And I was saying, bro, I don't care about these things. Like it's not that I don't like them. I look at them and I'm like, oh, that watch is cold. Then we told me the watch costs £32,000. I said, beg your pardon? Because I think when you've come from a place of investment and understanding that you make money from having money, the idea of reducing the amount of capital you have means you reduce the potential to make more money. And because I'm in an industry where you see transformation, you come and you see this studio as a shell, leaking roof, broken windows, and you get to transform it into something that's amazing that can make you money, but also aesthetically is pleasing. I don't think you need the ta-da moment of your bank account growing because you see it with your work, with the transformation of the projects that you're working on.
I feel like with yourself as well, you can see how passionate you are with what you do. I was speaking off air to Link before you came in, and I said I was very impressed by the content you put out, the production level. Something really struck me the other day. It was, I think you were speaking about being good to your neighbors when you have properties, and having that relationship, and when builders are obviously working, they're making a lot of noise and being considerate.
Yeah.
To me, that somebody who's very well educated in what they do, but is very passionate about what they do too. So I think I can echo your opinion, obviously, on what you said there in terms of it's about momentum and you love what you do, and I think that's very important.
No, for sure. And like with the neighbors, it's just like when it comes down to respect, the reality is, if someone starts building next to my house, am I gonna like being woken up at 7 o'clock in the morning, 8 o'clock in the morning when I've got a busy day ahead of me? Of course not. Am I gonna like that maybe there's some dust on my lovely car? Like, of course not. But the reality is like life isn't good all the time. But it's about respect, communication, and allowing people to see that actually, you know what? If I did offend you, I didn't mean that. Let's try and come up with a resolution that's going to make sense for both of us. And I think that's really a core of business, that just being respectful, being accountable, and operating with integrity, that is going to allow a lot of entrepreneurs and potential entrepreneurs to see success in their business.
No, definitely. Obviously you've got your own podcast and you've appeared on some very big channels before. I want to take it back. You growing up, if you could just let the viewers know where you grew up, and kind of how growing up was for you.
Yeah, no, for sure. So I grew up in Southeast London. It's funny, like I speak to people that are like, oh, I remember my first day of school. I remember this, I remember that. I think, oh, I don't know what I was doing. I don't remember anything. Like my first memories, like my solid memories that I don't feel like come from seeing pictures. I feel like in like my mid-teens sort of thing. But I mean, look, like I've got an amazing mum and dad who always, supported me. They showed me the value of hard work. They showed me the importance of being confident in yourself, being able to take risks. My mum used to live down in Devon with her family, which, at the time, moving from Devon to London is a big deal because a lot of people that grow up in these small towns never even leave them. My dad was born in Nigeria, first generation migrant, obviously had to leave friends, family, like, his parents, to come and move to the UK. So I think being raised by people that were willing to take risks to better themselves, definitely is something that was instilled with me. I think like, growing up, I don't know, I wasn't the best like behaved. I wasn't like the worst. I was kind of just, I think like the fear of disrespecting like my parents always kept me on the right track. So like at school, I'd never be, oh, I'm gonna get a detention, or you're gonna get suspended, or you've got this, that, whatever. None of that stuff bothered me. But like the idea of disappointing my parents or like letting them down, I think was what really kept me kind of outside of maybe going down the route a lot of my friends and neighbors and peers went down.
Did you have aspirations to get into business, or what was it that you wanted to do when you was younger?
Like, do you know what? And that's what I'm saying. Like, someone says, "Oh, what did you want to do?" I didn't really have like a massive like, oh, this is, some people from early say, I want to
Yeah.
play football, I want to be an actor, I want to do X, Y, or Z, like the kind of like glamorous stuff. I don't remember really wanting to do that much, but I always was an entrepreneur. I remember like from whatever it was, 12, 13, got my first paper round. I understood that if you do something, people will pay you. Like, but I always looked at things and I said, nah, there must be a way to make more. When you're again a bit older and you share my age, but we was getting paid like in cash. So we was getting, you know, like, you get the money and you see the actual physical money. You look at it, you say, oh, this is good, but I could do with some more. So I remember going to like the local like takeaway shops, being like, yo, I got this paper round. I'm a leaflet delivery expert now. You lot can come and put your leaflets in so I can get more money on top. And like that was kind of my first foray into, okay, people are gonna pay you something, but if you allow people to determine what they pay you, they're gonna pay you what they believe is right. If you can provide a service, you can demand what you think is right. And I think that's something that really stuck with me and said, okay, I'm going to be a businessman then.
I think what you're saying is quite interesting, and perhaps the timing of it for me, because last night I had a conversation with one of my colleagues to sometimes realize like maybe sometimes you can be an artist but recognize you're not an entrepreneur. That's a journey that I'm probably still on. But then this morning I think Stephen Bartlett just dropped a new pod with Alex Hormozy. And he said pretty much, I think the question was, can anyone become an entrepreneur? And it's insane because the way you've described your story, but having that product and having this ambition to do so, you could somewhat say yes. But I wanted to ask you, because obviously you're in there and you are really doing it. What's your opinion? Do you think anyone can be an entrepreneur?
Look, I'd ask you a question in response, yeah? Can anybody become a footballer? The reality is yes, anybody can go and pay their £10 or whatever it is, or pay nothing and kick a ball around. Should everyone become a footballer? No is the answer, because it comes from skill set. And the same thing is true when we talk about being, anybody can be an entrepreneur. There is nothing holding any of you back from saying, let me try my hand at being an entrepreneur. But also, we all have natural skill sets, natural risk tolerances, natural preferences that are going to make things best for us. And I think some people's personal demeanor means actually they're going to thrive way more in an industry. And I'll give you like, and also like, not to kind of like to put things in perspective. I know people that make way more money than me working a 9 to 5. I know people that make way more money than 99.9% of the population. Like there was one time, like I raise investor finance, right? Sometimes we have investors on projects. I remember somebody, so when we do this, we have to do all the AML stuff, like the anti-money laundering and the KYC and know your client, and we've got to do the proof of funds. So generally speaking, people's proof of funds are like, oh, I've just sold a house. Here's my savings account. Here's my crypto portfolio. This guy was like, he was investing, I think it was circa £250,000. For his proof of funds, he just sent me his payslip for the last month. It was 330,000. Like, so just to understand, like, just because anybody can be, doesn't mean that's what works best for you. And I know some people that work really well with structure and a business setup where the entrepreneurial life isn't for them. And I know some people that feel like they're in a cage if they're in a 9 to 5, and are going to be so much better if they can kind of dictate their own time and hours.
And I think for me, that's what it comes down to, because I'm at the period where people know me for my work as a photographer, but I'm juggling running a business with Tad. And I think that's where we kind of gel well, because he's quite business minded, business oriented. I just care about the art. But I'm also at the point where I'm trying to figure out, from a financial point of view, what is it that I have to do as an artist that can maybe improve my business sense to become more entrepreneurial? Because in that case, like, should I be an entrepreneur, or is it a could?
So for you, let's say like you as an artist in a creative space, you got a product that works. Like you're a creative, which has a lot of crossover from being an entrepreneur, because you generally don't work from somebody else. You have to tender your own work. But the reality is, in business, you are not expected to do every part of your business. You're expected to, you have like different levels of tasks. So your highest level task might be actually creating, whether it's the content, the videography, the photography, whatever it is that you specialize in. That's really the cash producing element of the business. But for you to create the content, you have to have a marketing. You have to have a marketing like arm of the business. So are you going to hire somebody to do marketing, or are you good at it? Same with like, your administration. You can have great marketing, loads of people through the door, create great content. But if nobody pays your invoices, then the business will fold. So I think the reality is, sometimes being an entrepreneur is just being a people manager. It's doing that literally whatever you learn at 14, 15, 16, SWOT analysis, day one on you, on like, so I would look at Kaz Limited and be like, what am I good at? What are my strengths? What are my weaknesses? How do these create opportunities? What are the threats to me? And then how can I put people around me or systems in place that mean that I can focus on the high value tasks or other people can focus on the things that I may be not so good at or are not a good use of my time.
So that's quite interesting because in some sense you can be an entrepreneur but have delegated the things that you're maybe weaker at,
Like an
let's say.
entrepreneur doesn't
Mm,
mean like you have to be a one-man band, like
mm.
self-employed, just jack of all trades. A lot of the time we are, and for a lot way, like whether it's starting out or over long periods of times we are. But I think realistically, yeah, anybody can be. It's just down to personal preference. Does it match your current like lifestyle?
I think, going back to you mentioning your earlier days, you had that that kind of motivation to go out and make money. From my research and obviously
Hmm.
knowing yourself, you had a shisha place.
Yeah, so I had a shisha business.
Was that one of your first businesses?
Yeah, that was one of my funnest businesses that I set up because it was a passion project to start. I went to Egypt, had a sick time, was like, yo, this is a thing. Like this is, we don't drink. So it's like something social I could do with friends. Investments were low. Like when I just kind of like top level ran the numbers, I was like, okay, so I'm gonna buy the shisha for this amount. I'll buy all the setup and the material that I can keep using over and over again. So realistically, like the return on investment was like ridiculous. Like the margins from the whole shisha side of things were amazing. So that was great. I actually was interested in it, and it just was a business that kind of started with an idea. And the first idea actually was to do shisha delivery. That was
Okay.
my first initial idea. In my head, I said, yo, I bought these like 10 shisha pipes. I've got flavor. I set up the website, the business cards, all these things, because I drove bikes as well. Like I had motorbikes. I was like, oh, people are gonna book. I'm gonna drop the shisha off to them. But then, and I think that's one probably really important takeaway. Your first idea probably isn't gonna be your best idea. And you need to learn to fail fast and be confident enough to pivot in business. So at the point now I realized actually me driving around on my 600cc motorbike trying to deliver a shisha at like £40 a pop in London is very limited in terms of what I can make for time and money. So then started focusing on fixed venues, like so go into existing premises. Then, we pivoted from the existing premises into festivals, where there was a lot better returns because we had a natural, really high footfall. And that allowed us to open our own premise as well.
Where was that?
That was in Elephant and Castle, so just around the corner from my university.
And how long did you have that premises for, that business?
So it was for around, I want to say just under 2 years. And look, to start with, again, love the business, love the idea. Over time, because we also, it was like a cocktail bar as well. You're dealing with a lot of people that are maybe intoxicated, a lot of late nights. And I think over time as a business, it didn't align so much to the lifestyle that I wanted to live. And there was also other factors just in relation to the ownership. Like I've spoke about this a few times, and it's probably really prevalent at the moment because of what's going on with this pub. I don't know if you've seen it. It's called the Queen of the South.
Yeah.
So basically what we had was a license to trade rather than a lease. So that meant that at any point in time, the landlord could be like, you got to get out. So imagine you spent all this money creating this nice studio and they're actually like, you know what, here's your 1 month's notice, you've got to get out. So all of your investment is down the pan. And whilst obviously Clem and the guys over at Queen of the South, they do have a lease, I think their lease didn't offer them maybe the necessary security to trade without any fear of being evicted. So I think that was like an eye opener to me that looked like, whatever I do next, like we got to own the building. And so there was a really kind of natural segue into property.
Is that one of the reasons why you obviously
Yeah, it was just a case of I was like, listen, like, and I think to be fair, like speaking to my dad at the time, I remember like he was like, he said like when he first set up his business, he was talking to his business partner was talking about like leasing this building, and my dad just looked at him and said, "I'm Nigerian. We don't lease, we buy." So in my head, I said, "Yeah, that sounds hard. I'm gonna put that on a t-shirt one day."
Yeah, that's cold. So, you, obviously, you're a man of God. Did you we obviously believe that happened for a reason. Naturally, if that hadn't happened, maybe you would not have.
Yeah, no, for sure, because that business was really profitable. That business is where a lot of the money came from to do, to do my first deal, and it I'm still grateful for, obviously, like I said, the whole journey side of things. I'm massively grateful for my journey, but yeah, everything happens for a reason. I think it's the same thing. Why I answered your question, the first question, would you start again? Every experience that I've had has taken me to where I am now, and so for the good, the bad, the ugly, I say like there's there's a lesson in every experience, and you take on board that some of the worst things that have happened to you have probably resulted in some of the best.
So, Shisha Lounge, would you say it was relatively successful at the time? Was it?
Yeah, no, Shisha Lounge business was booming.
It was good
Like we
stuff,
had
yeah.
our locals, we had our regulars, we had good events. Like I think we had the World Cup on that year, so it was all the Euros, I think. So it's super busy during the week. I was at the uni around the corner, so I was starting to build the clientele, and there was so much potential, which is a shame. Like it was a business that over time I always kind of dabbled into like, should I go back into one or should I invest in one? I haven't to date, but it's not to say that we won't.
Cash flow, was it much investment at that time? I'm
Nah,
guessing you was
because
at
it was an
university.
existing pub, so a lot of the setup was already there.
Okay.
And that's why we were able to transact in the way we were, because the setup was already there. Like, it was a warm lead in terms of the introduction to get the place in the first place. I think, it allowed me, particularly at that age, because I'm like 21 or something like that at that age,
Yeah.
to be able to operate, because I wouldn't have had the cash to go and pay, for example, typically 6 months deposit, 6 months rent up front, do a full renovation. I've got people that, around me that do that type of thing, and they're looking in probably £250,000 to set up that type of venture, which was nowhere near.
And then how did you stumble into obviously what you do now?
Yes, at the time, like, I was already kind of doing what I'd advise most of you that are looking at property to do, which is really immerse yourself in any opportunities around the space. At the time, content wasn't as prevalent. So what I was really doing is just finding other developers. I'd went to the odd networking event, try and meet people, go down to their sites, understand what's working, what isn't, why it isn't working for whatever reason. And then, yeah, like just on sort of saying I'm going to close up, took the money from that to go and buy my first property, which was a stone's throw from where I lived then, where I live now. I've always stayed kind of geographically located quite similar. And that was a property that I purchased. I think it was at auction. It was with a bridging loan. It was in a bad condition. It was from a housing association. And I say all of that to say, like, they're the exact same type of deals that I do now. You haven't always got to reinvent the wheel. You can sometimes just refine, scale, but still continue.
I think one of the main reasons I really wanted you on was not just because of your journey and obviously how successful you've become, but also the fact that when I look at your content, you're realistic, you're very pragmatic, and you're honest with things. And I feel like in a day and age where we live with social media, and kind of like podcasts and a lot of things, and people are like selling courses and kind of selling you a dream, I think it's important to have role models or people to look up to who are going to be quite honest in what they're saying.
Yeah, no, for sure. Like all the time, like sometimes like my team will say like, yo, we got this content idea. And I'll look at that and they're like, yeah, we need to use this viral hook. And I'm like, I'm not saying that. And they're like, yeah, but if you say it like this, it's not going to go viral. And I'm like, I'm not saying that. Like that doesn't represent me. Like, and also you attract what you put out. If I put out like me, fancy watch, me in a Lamborghini, me, like all you're gonna get is people that are chasing fast money. And if people want to work alongside you, they've got to share similar values in terms of being in it for like a long time, not just a good time.
All right, guys, we're going to pause the video. And I'm not going to lie, I've said this like 3 times. I've had 3 interruptions. So I'm just going to do this and get this out there right now. We are here to give a big, massive shout out to our sponsor, Wingtrap. They've been rocking with us from day one. And so I'll put all the links and stuff as I do around here. And remember, it's your boy, the cameraman that never dies. See you guys in the next episode. Oh, and if you do like the content we've been putting out, you know what I mean? If you like the content that we've been making, it means a lot to us for you guys to like, subscribe, and share, and send it to your friends. Send it to your mom. Send it to your dad. I won't complain. I won't complain. Right, back to the video.
Yo.
I feel like when I hear somebody like you talk, and perhaps it's how old are you, sorry?
36 now, which is why I'll be in the senior paddle team.
Okay. Maybe that's where I don't quite, but it sounds like you got off into business world quite early. And so my question, when I kind of see people that have achieved that, because it takes a lot of discipline, which I appreciate. But what if your typical 21-year-old is out partying, having a laugh, early years, you literally just came out of the education system. What do you think that perhaps you were afraid of or running from that made you realize it's best to secure your future now? It's fine, I'll have the fun later.
Oh no, that like even see when you just said that, yeah, I got a little chill, like, because that is the perfect thing. I, from about the age of 21, have been scared of failure. Up till this day, that is my biggest fear. I can jump out of a plane, you could put me in a box, but I'm so scared to fail.
That's interesting because your advice earlier is also to fail fast. So how do you then?
Because so I'll tell you the story of what happened. Naturally, we all go to school, right? You, me, him, her, we all go to school. We're all in the same place. We have to go there. Generally, then everybody goes college or sixth form. We're all together. But I messed around my first year of sixth form. I've failed that. Then I went to university, did 2 years of university and dropped out. So I'm now, circa like 20 years old, 20 to, my business hasn't started yet. My friends that maybe, that have dropped out of school when they were like 15, 16, they've been working for 4 or 5 years. They're seeing decent money. They've had a couple promotions. They've got a career. My friends that have just finished university, because that's the age everybody's supposed to finish, they're going on to these grad schemes and working abroad and doing all these amazing things. Even down to my friends that are doing illicit stuff. They're, they're living life. And I was 20, like I said, 20, pushing 21. I've just dropped out of university, like for basically, like after, I'm sort of 3-4 years behind my peers. And I just had no idea what to do. And I think I've gone and kind of spoke to my dad and I'm whispering I don't know, what do I do? And he just looked at me and was like, you're a man now. Like, what do you mean? What are you going to do? Like, grow up and work it out. They weren't his exact words, but like in my head, I just felt like this small, like I'm seeing all my friends shining. And I just said, I'm not going to feel like this again. So I don't think there's anything wrong with failing like individually, but like I felt like a failure in life at that point. And I think I just said, this can't happen. And it's probably not the best thing, but up until then, I've built like my life in a way that I help and support so many people around me that my fear of failure now isn't just for me, but it's like I can't afford to let myself or all these people around me down.
And so I guess with that, at some point you stumble. How do you then manage to keep yourself off that trajectory and not give up? Is it just that pure drive to then not fail?
I've got my own little coping mechanism hack. Like, see, sometimes, like, I'll have something like I might, like in property, I don't know, you could get something for whatever reason, a planning enforcement notice, a big issue. Like, you're dealing with like expensive stuff. So like sometimes I get something and just I get a message that might cost you 10,000. Sometimes it might cost you £100,000 loss. Sometimes it might just be a load of stress. It might be a staff member that's really important to you, who's like gonna resign for whatever reason. And when I have like these moments, and I used it as a coping mechanism from like, I can't remember, probably school. I say, listen, today I'm going to bed. But tomorrow we wake up and it's a new day and we go again. So I'll allow myself one day. Whatever's happened, I give myself the day. I take the day, I'll sleep, relax. I might eat some junk food, but I'm just going to say, look, because if you don't allow yourself any time, so I think they call it in like therapy, it's like decompress. you just end up like spiraling. So that's what works for me. And I don't say that will work for everybody, but I say find your thing. It might be a conversation with a friend. It might be a conversation with a partner. It might be therapy. But find like your way of managing the edge, because you don't want to do something that pushes yourself off.
So going back to obviously your journey, you've bought your first property, which I saw on your Instagram. You went back because it's quite sentimental to you.
Yeah.
So is that like something that you do?
Do you know what? Like, it's this weird thing of like, when you're just rushing around, you don't really think about it. But because I've bought a lot of properties like in close proximity to where I live, you know, sometimes like I might be doing work experience with some of the young boys, like or whatever, and I'm just kind of, so I'm just having to be a little bit more, like, you know, having to kind of reminisce a little bit and talk about what I was like at their age or a little bit older. And I'm driving around, I'm like, oh, I used to own that. I offered on that. Oh, I sold that. Oh, I still own that. And it's like, you know, you feel like you're playing real life Monopoly. Like, oh, that's mine, that's mine, that's mine. And it's like, but it is like, it was really interesting sometimes seeing not just the value of, oh, I made money for myself. We went back to that first property that I ever did. And it wasn't like something where we were trying to make content. It wasn't like anything else. It was like, look, that's 13 years ago, something like that. And I just happened to see the guy that lived in the building. So it was 4 flats in the building. One guy was another like guy at the time. I call him uncle, older Black African guy. And obviously at the time I just used to chat to him again, just friendly neighborhood stuff. And he was like, Kaz, like, I just want to thank you. And I was like, oh, thank you, bro. Like, good to see you. He's like, no. And he probably stopped me. He's like, no, I just want to thank you. Like, because at the time you was telling me, like, why don't you buy your place? Like, you can buy it under, like, right to buy. Like, buy your place. It doesn't make any sense. And he's like, well, we bought it. Like, we bought it, like, 7 years ago. We bought the place. 5 years later, we refinanced. And now, like, me and my family, we got 3 properties. And it was like, I wasn't trying to be an educator at that stage. I was just being like, look, I've got these good people that are, you know, allowing me to obviously do the renovation without too much headache. I was just trying to share what I thought would be good for them, and they acted on it, and they were successful, and it's probably made like a big difference in his life and his family's life, which is great to see, I guess.
See you now, and obviously you articulate yourself quite well. You're educated in naturally. You're going to be educated in what you do because obviously it's what you do. Obviously, you see the properties you own, but obviously along the way there's challenges. Naturally, there's going to be people see the highs, the lows. You know, obviously you see kind of the homes under the hammer kind of revolution, and you think, oh wow, like, you know. But talk to us a bit about the struggles, and one thing I wanted to mention to you as well, like, you know, builders. Because you always hear these things where it's like, oh, this builder's done me over, or something's going on. How do you build a relationship? How does these things?
It's a lot of that. So where she start builders wise. Yeah, builders are interesting. I don't know what the equivalent would be like in your industry. To be honest with you, I think videographers round me up more than builders, you know.
Swear.
I feel like I find the creatives more stressful, because it's like I'll be trying to have a conversation with them and I feel like they want to dance. Like I'm just like, they're always like everything, there's always just something going on. Like I want to explain why we're doing it this way for business, but they want to explain like their thoughts and feelings. And we're like, I can't find the balance. But yeah, I'm just angry at videographers overall, but shout you guys out anyway.
To be fair, I think, they're so gonna do me for this, but I think videographers can be a bit more pretentious than your general creative.
They're just like, and do you know what it is? Some of them want to be videographers behind the camera, but also want to tell me what to do in front of the camera. And I'm like, no, let me shine. This is my thing.
I think it's like a director's complex, in it. You want to be the guy to make the film, but you also want to be Tom Cruise in the film.
Yeah, and it's like finding that balance. But see, I've struggled with videographers, but builders wise, yeah. Look, the builders I used 13 years ago are not the builders I would use today. They're just not the same standard. The same way they say the person that takes you to your first 100,000 isn't going to be the person that takes you to your first million. It's the same with construction. Starting early out, we've got much smaller margins, much smaller budgets. We're managing individual trades. Now we use much bigger teams. I just think, look, like, you're going to be working with these builders probably for the better part of 3 to 6 months, depending on the size of your project, it's gonna be like a little mini relationship. So I think there's so many like things you have to do. You have to probably go down to some of their existing sites, speak to some of their existing clients with changes in taxation and HMRC's ways they report on Companies House. Go and look at actually their current accounts and make sure they are buoyant enough to take on your projects. But for me, like I'm a massive believer in business is a people business. If I can sit down with you and think, look, we can have a conversation, and I think that there's going to be an issues in like, inevitably on any project, but we're going to be able to just resolve them as people, then that's probably like my thing is like, is this somebody I think I can actually work with when things are going wrong? Because it's easy to work with everyone when things are going right. But is it somebody that actually I think is going to be reasonable when there is conflict or there is a dispute?
Sorry, I know we're doing like a paddle between the keeping it contextual to what it is that you do. But I think mostly because we have a creative community,
Yeah.
as well as the business owners that do watch this content. Could you speak to us maybe on that experience in terms of how you market your business?
Yeah, no.
How do you guys maybe allocate a marketing budget? Because I think for us as creators, sometimes as well, it's having that conversation where a client might think they only need 2 videos, so they might just pay X amount of pounds. But I think when you're operating on a higher scale, you have a better understanding of the value of marketing. So what's that kind of like for you as a business owner? How do you run this?
Yeah, so look, if you were to go and hire a marketing company tomorrow, for the scale at which I'd probably want to market, it could easily be in the 6 figures a year. But obviously, your social media is your shop front. It is your marketing. Well, you mentioned Alex Hormozy earlier. He's someone that, probably posts 3 times a day, every day. That's 1,000 pieces of content a year. But I think you need to find the most efficient way to reach as many people as possible in the most relatable manner. So for us, we use internal systems, like we use something called Asana to schedule all of our content. We then upload ideas. We have ideation days where we have to everybody collectively has to come up with different ideas. We work on the ones that work, we script them, and then we deliver them on content days where it's like, right, I need these videos from you, these videos from you, these B-roll shots, this voiceover. So what that does is it doesn't turn me into a full-time content creator. I block my time very specifically to be like, okay, right, so you've got 2 hours for ideation, 2 hours for review, 2 filming days, and 1 podcast day, for example, in a month. And that's the commitment. And then outside of that, we then internally hire our own editors, own videographers, multiple like VAs to manage and repurpose the content. But it is something that, it's the lifeblood of your business. What's her name? Haley. I can't butcher her name and she's going to shout at me, but it is her quote. So I'm going to have to get her name up before I say it. But I think this is probably one of my favorite things. Haley Malunda, she's got this thing where she says, you are too broke to be invisible. Like, you do not have enough money in your bank account right now to afford for people not to see you. I don't have enough money. I'm here, I come to Leicester, hour on a train back, because I know that this is optics. It's eyes and ears, people that are going to see what you do, and it's going to present opportunities for you in the future.
So maybe then 2 things, sorry, just to wrap that part up. But so from a business perspective, then how do you, I suppose when it comes to the nature of allocating funds, do you have a strong belief that marketing is important, so you're going to put more money and value into it? Because I think a lot of people get shocked when a videographer says like, or whatever creator says, it's going to cost you this much. That becomes a bit of a shock to them.
I think, look, for a lot of people, the real sticking point there is, do they want awareness or do they want conversion? Because when people can see that this video, I'm going to spend X and it's going to convert to X amount of sales, so I get a direct return on investment. But when you're spending money on marketing for awareness, where it's just people knowing about you, where you don't tangibly manage the return from that investment, people find it a lot harder. I think as a starting point, this isn't to downplay anything that creatives do, but there's a lot you can do in-house before you go externally to high-level editors. Quite like somebody can come and book this studio, and if they focus with an ideation day beforehand, focus on just between them and their phone, getting out 10 to 15 pieces of short form content, you then couple that with maybe your evergreen, more highly produced content that maybe you want from a more marketing or direct perspective that maybe you're going to use and run ads behind. But I think, look, if you're going to run a service-based industry, if you have leads that you need to generate, you're going to have what you can kind of pay per lead, and you can incorporate that into the cost of the content production, but also the potentially ad spend behind it as well.
So which leads me to the last bit, because I'm not sure how your property business works, but it seems to me you're the face of your brand. And so how do you manage, I imagine if you have an exit plan, what's your plan in terms of perhaps how the business markets itself? Because once you've essentially removed from yourself, there's some value that will be lost in that sense.
No, definitely. And I think it's very, I went full circle with this. Like I went through, okay, cool. I'm just, like I said, I am Kaz, it's my business. Then down to, that was a stupid idea. Why did I make myself the face of it? What about when I don't want to do stuff? But the reality is people buy into people. So it's a lot easier to get people to engage with you as an individual than it is with you as a business. It's the reason that Richard Branson has way more followers than Virgin. The reason that, if you look at all of these companies and look at the founder versus the company themselves, people buy into the person. In answer to your question, like what could be the exit? There's a track record to show of, people in similar industries like me that are able to exit, because it's also the value of the offering. Like, yes, I can be the face of it, but realistically, the business is underpinned by the strength of the entire team as opposed to just myself.
I think that's very insightful information, especially from someone like yourself who's quite active on social media. AI. How is AI chat GPT in your sector, in your company, keeping up with technology? How's that having an effect on things?
I think when you look at like a lot of the big softwares that people use in property, and this goes across the board, like whether people are looking for land and they're looking at like Land Insight or Boom or various different companies that do that, AI is being integrated into finding opportunities, which previously would have been a kind of like a secret source that developers would have used. You just spoke about marketing. Likewise, AI now is massive, like, in terms of people writing their scripts, finding content ideas, the incorporation of that to actually create the content as well, along with, creating the actual content. Like AI is able to do that. For us personally, obviously because we physically create the products, there's not so much AI can do, but definitely from a back-end perspective, in terms of the community that we set up and run, there's AI integrations that allow us to run like chat facilities for the content creation as well, in terms of, actually once we've done the ideation personally, we then use AI to kind of sharpen it and polish the edges to make it, a lot more usable.
What would you say? Because I think the limitations you speak of at the moment are correct, but there will be a point to where AI is able to handle even the front end of things. Does that look like quite far into the future for you, or is that more for a case where
I think
you hope to be out by then?
a lot of, like, if you speak to people in property, right, and they say, what's the number one rule in property? It's buy cheap, sell high. And the reason you're able to do that is because of a lack of information, and because people are unable to identify the potential. I think what AI is going to do is bridge that gap of lack of information, which means there's going to be a very clear number on what any given plot, piece of land, property, leasehold, freehold, commercial unit is worth. And I think once there's, AI can kind of maybe establish a predetermined price per square foot now, price per square foot after development, I think there's not going to be that disparity that allows developers to make the kind of like super normal profits that we're all chasing. In terms of how far that is in the future, you'd have to ask a tech guy, man. I'm just here taking each day as it comes.
No, understand that the current state of the UK obviously threats on people moving abroad because of tax purposes. Dubai seems to be obviously for quite a while now. How's that affecting the property economy in the UK and people like yourself?
Yeah, so we're seeing a mass exodus of millionaires from the UK. I just have to say personally, I hear it. I love Dubai. I love loads of other places that I've traveled to, but I'm a proper Londoner. Like I know it's an unpopular opinion, but I really like London. I don't think there's any place I'd rather live in this world. I enjoy it. So for me, that's not really an issue. London is still one of the most desirable places to live in the world by various different studies. We have massive amounts of demand for the supply of high quality units. And I think, we're on a small island that has high demand. So we're in a good place.
Fair enough. I think obviously, you know, being from London and obviously making your money there as well as obviously had another kind of obviously influence on you and your decision making. Another question I've got for you is young couple, you know, maybe might be recently married, currently right now. Funds are low. What would you advise? Obviously, you mentioned bridging loans earlier. Could we go into a bit more depth about what you would recommend if cash flow and kind of people haven't got that much money, how they can kind of get onto the property ladder?
Yeah, I mean, in terms of getting onto the property ladder, so young couple, let's say they're not in property, they just want to get onto the ladder. So
Yeah.
that means we're not going to be talking about bridging loans generally. We're not going to be talking about buy-to-let mortgages, commercial mortgage. We're going to be talking about your standard residential mortgage.
Yep.
So for those that are not familiar, let's kind of start with the real basics. Generally speaking, banks will lend you up to 4.5 times your salary. So let's, for argument's sake, say that they're both on 25K.
Yeah.
That means that they are combined, because you can combine the salary with your spouse, but you can do this with a sibling, you can do this with a friend. So combined salary now of 50K, which means 4.5 times 50K means a lender would lend them up to £225,000. Now, caveat that we have to say, if you do have, for example, large credit cards, bank loans, other outgoings, kids, etc., they are going to reduce your affordability, but top level, that's where you're at. Now, typically in the UK market, a bank would expect you to have a 10% deposit, which means that if you want to now buy a property for 250K, they're going to expect you to have a 10% deposit, so that's £25,000, and they're going to expect you then to borrow the remaining 225,000. So you could potentially look to buy a property for 250,000. On the train down there, I got sent a great deal actually in Leicester. The property is being marketed at 270,000. It's actually below market value because the vendor needs a quick sell. They're willing to accept maybe 230. That could be the type of property that you could purchase. Now, obviously, £25,000 is still not a small amount of money by any means. There are deposits with 5%, which means you would need £12,500. They have actually now reintroduced some 100% mortgage deposits. Now, I'm not a massive fan of these schemes because, like any scheme, there are cons that come with the pros of not having to put money in up front. However, it just goes to show that there are multiple opportunities to get on the ladder. Yes, it's difficult. Yes, you do have to protect your credit to show that you're a viable person to lend money to. But I do think, and obviously I say this from a place of privilege, but I don't think, particularly outside of London, it's as difficult as a lot of people, make out. It is very viable to maintain your credit just through having startup credit cards, phone contracts, having utilities in your name, making sure you're on the electoral roll. I'm pretty sure, again, if you're earning £25,000, I think it's a viable salary because that's within the UK average wage. Again, I've just gave an example of a property that is affordable, so as based on that we're in Leicester today. So it's not to say that I'm not saying it's easy, but I do think it's very viable. And I think also when you're talking about maybe saving £12,500 between two people, you're saving £12,500. Let's work that back. That's just over £6,000 per person. That's £500 a month. Like I said, I went through a period where I wasn't buying Gucci whether I could afford it. I wasn't just going to the shop every day and eating out every day. Like, I'm not saying it's the easiest, but I'm saying it is viable. And I think people like to complain more than they like to do hard work.
I think as well, there is, like you said, it is difficult, but when you kind of do break it up like that, you think, yeah, it is doable, especially perhaps more the 5% options. But there's a lot of talk at the moment, which is quite popular. You've seen the likes of Gary Stevenson,
Gary Economics. Yeah.
economics, yeah. We have a lot of talks of wealth inequality, and in conjunction to what you're saying, then, do you think that is happening, or is it making things more difficult? Is it still possible? Because it seems like it's increasingly getting harder and harder for people to be even at a state where the 12% option seems to be
I'll answer this with so for example, pre-financial crisis, 2007, we're looking at double-digit interest rates. That's over 200% what they are now. Previously, there was no such thing as a buy-to-let mortgage, so you weren't able to buy property in that way. Yes, a lot of things have got harder. You're very right in that there is a lot of disparity when it comes to people's earnings versus property prices. Real earnings haven't increased in relation to inflation. But also the question reverts back to, can anybody be an entrepreneur? It's not really, there's always going to be a reason why things are difficult. But as an entrepreneur, it's your job to find out how potentially those threats to the market create opportunities. If somebody asks me what should they do first, I would say create a business before buying a property, because the cash flow and the returns are going to be a lot higher. At the point in which you've created that business, you can then go and buy a property. And I think when you look at the Gary Economics of this world, they're very good at highlighting problems, but very poor at coming up with viable solutions that people would actually get on board with. Because I can come up with loads of problems I can walk into a studio and say, why is this like this? Why is that like that? But also it's like, well, where's your studio? And how did you fix yours?
I think that's quite interesting as well, because something that you said just really touched on me. In terms of, I think people are living outside the means again, because you said there's a period you went through where you wasn't buying Gucci, where you wasn't doing XYZ, and you get the same people who want to buy a house, can't afford to buy a house, but they're still going on these holidays with the mates. And
Look, it's just priorities. It's like short-term sacrifice for long-term gains. I'm not the person that's going to say, if you don't buy a cup of coffee from Costa once a week, you're going to buy a house tomorrow. But I'm the person that's going to say, listen, if you don't focus on what you want in the short term, you're not going to have it in the long term. So whether or not it's the holiday trade-off, whether or not it's working harder, there were times when I set my second business up, which was the rent-to-rent company, I was probably doing 70, 80 hours a week. And it was because I knew what I wanted to get out of it. Every action has a reaction. Every piece of effort you put in, the goal is that you're going to see a return on your personal investment, on your personal circumstances.
But just to close in on that bit, then I think you also said the idea of starting a business to then buy a property at a later point. I actually really like that, because I think it's this kind of path that I've chosen, where my question to you then is, between renting and buying a property, I always say to people, if you want to start a business, it seems odd that you don't have the capital to run a business, but you own your house.
Yeah, look, and it's everything is down to like personal priorities. It's down to risk parameters. Some people would much rather have the security of investing in their house, benefit from capital appreciation, and know that really they just go to work, pay off their house, but they can't start a business because they maybe have a lower risk tolerance because you're unlikely to lose that money in your house.
How many of those people are actually seeing the return on investment of owning their homes? Because for me, it feels like unless if you own more than one property, then a lot of the people, especially like you said, a lot of people are not business savvy. They just essentially have their home security, but
But I'll tell you why. So, for example, obviously, the historic model would be you just own a home, you pay it off as quickly as possible, and then you own your home tax free. Whereas, if, for example, you can reverse engineer it, you buy a house, that same house that I said for £220,000, right? £230,000 is the example that we used with a 5% deposit. So you put in circa £12,000 to buy the property. Now that property realistically in this current market is worth 50 to 60,000, 250 to 260,000 pounds. It's just they needed a quick sell. But let's even assume you get small capital appreciation of maybe 5% a year over the next 4 years. So that property now, when you go and get it revalued after the end term of your mortgage, even let's say it's worth 280,000, you can now refinance as long as your income's gone up enough and get the money back out of your property. So that same person that bought that home, because you benefit from leverage, you get the capital appreciation of the entire value of the property, even though you only put in a deposit of 5%. So sometimes, and I've seen this, like people make more money from their home than they do from going to work sometimes. And I say that as an example. It doesn't mean that that's going to be the right course of action for everybody, but it's horses for courses. For some people, buying a home is going to be the exact thing they should do. For some people, them setting up a business is going to be the perfect solution for them. And I think that the problem with like this internet era of microwave consumable content is to go viral. I have to come on here and be like, you're doing it wrong if you don't do this. But the reality is that's nonsense. There's no such thing as a one size fits all scenario. You're doing it wrong if you listen to the person telling you they know exactly what you should do without knowing your scenario. So I think that the best piece of advice I would do is do personal SWOT analysis. Work out what you want, work out your own strengths and weaknesses, and then curate a strategy around who you are.
I think that's, very good advice and pragmatic advice because, you know, I think a lot of this is education, which leads on to my next point, which is obviously yourself coming from an inner city area in London, coming from an ethnic background. Do you think there are enough young people from inner city areas, or generally not even young people, but you could be of any age that are going into property, owning enough, or do you still think that the times are changing a little bit?
Yes, as a starting point, like I remember going to like my first networking event, and it did feel like just I was just in a room with old white middle-aged men. I didn't speak to anyone that day. Didn't really feel like I belong, and that's probably the reason I set up, the PBK community. It's just to make property investment feel more inclusive and really feel like anybody, given the right tools, given the right resources, can be a landlord. They can be a property investor. They can be a homeowner. And we've seen amazing results throughout the community. Like just recently, like I bought a property. Months later, somebody else from the community bought another one on the road. So I very, easily could have felt like, oh, you know what, I want to buy this one. But I think that kind of crabs in a bucket mentality is very much at the lower end of the spectrum. And they say like, competition is what happens at the bottom and collaboration is what happens at the top. And I think the more we share our stories, share our experiences, share our expertise, it means that the more of us can actually be active property investors, business owners, entrepreneurs, helping each other, maneuver to continue to climb the rungs, of the success ladder.
So you mentioned PBK investment. Can you tell us a little bit more about that, and if how our viewers or anybody can get involved who's interested in getting into property? I know you've spoken vocally before about not just pushing courses out there, which I respect highly as well, because I feel like even us as podcast kind of owners, we have to give people the platform and the right people the platform, because you'll have young people watching and people watching, and there's so many kind of scams out there where people are just trying to make a quick buck. Tell us a bit about PBK investment.
Yeah, so PBK community, again, I reach like hundreds of thousands, sometimes millions of people across various different platforms, and was constantly being bombarded by people saying, can you mentor me? Can I shadow you? Can I learn from you? And I was like, look, it's not viable for me to do at this stage because I'm just still trying to develop. Like, I want to focus on being a developer. But I realized that I did have something to give. So I thought, what would I have wanted starting out? And what I realized is you need that support network. So as part of being a community member, you get access to like my power team. That's my architect, my solicitor, my structural engineer, my accountant, my in-house business consultant, all of the people that you would need to give you the confidence to go and do your first deal. We then have like a sounding board of our actual in-house group mentorship where you can kind of 24/7 just go and ask questions. And we do like site visits, we do online events, offline events. But realistically, my whole thing is how can we help you be a developer and get to where you want to be without maybe making some of the mistakes that I made and some of the pitfalls of just trying to learn online. So we're now probably a community of about just under 100 people. Seen some amazing success stories, people going from never owning property to now making hundreds of thousands of pounds a year, which is amazing. Just want to keep pushing that and keep kind of changing the narrative just bit by bit.
And it's pretty fascinating to hear because I think growing community is always the one of the most ways to know you're doing something that's impactful. How does it feel when you know that you are actually creating impact? Because I think that's something that most people just want to feel like they have a purpose.
I think it's easy, like you said, as a business owner, to just constantly be ticking off a to-do list. Tomorrow we're gonna do this, tomorrow I'm gonna do that. But I think one of the benefits outside of the financial remuneration of being like the founder of the PBK community is that I actually get to stop and smell the roses. Like, it's very easy to just shun your own success. But when it's the success of somebody that you've actively helped to mentor get there, like I'll be buzzing. Like when someone will be like, "Oh, I just won this property auction." I feel like it's my first ever deal. When someone's like, "Yeah, it's just gone under offer," I'll be absolutely buzzing. And some of the feedback that I've got from members that have joined, and the fact that we have a very high retention rate just goes to show the value that we're offering.
And why is that important to you?
Um, I think it's important from a motivational standpoint of keeping going, but I think more so it's like, that feedback loop of actually you're doing things right. And I think a lot of us suffer from imposter syndrome. I think I don't know enough, I can't do enough. So I think one of the best ways to overcome imposter syndrome is actually to teach, is actually to educate, because the second people are answering you questions and you've got all the answers, it's a lot harder to doubt yourself when you can actively see the success for others. Because for yourself, you can put it down to, I was just lucky, I was just fortunate. But when you can repeat that and have a track record of your information and your knowledge creating success stories, it's a lot harder to doubt yourself.
So you mentioned obviously the investment group. How, if somebody wants to get in touch, are there any entry requirements? How can they reach out to you?
Yeah, so we have like a video explaining everything about it. What I'm gonna do is I'll send you the link so you can put it in this video. So it's gonna be down there somewhere for the community. You have a one-to-one call with myself, but again, it's not high sales or how can we get you in. It's more of a conversation to be like, look, are your goals aligned with our goals? And do I think I'm going to be the right person to help you? And vice versa, do I think you're a good fit for the community? Because this community is like, it's like my baby. So it's like, I've really curated and cultivated a culture within the community that we want to maintain. So anybody coming in has to join us. It's very much a us.
No, I think that's dope, and I think the energy that you put out, and kind of like even just mentioning community and the way you want to do things, you really want to help people. So I think that's a
Thank you, brother.
really insightful thing for our viewers to get involved with. I'm sure some people that I know personally are going to be watching this pod and thinking,
Oh, man.
I'm gonna hit up
Tell
Kaz.
them jump on a call, man. We'll see how we can help.
Yeah, no, for real, it's been a pleasure, man. I wish we could have more time because
You know me, listen, you know me. This is not my racket. But yeah, no, for sure. This is, like I said, this is now gonna be my second home, my pod. Whenever you want me back, as long as you lot flood the comment section and let them know that you enjoyed this, I'll be back on demand, on command. Obviously, you know that I've got to go. I've got to go destroy one of the locals at paddle with my bro over there that I know is waiting for me. But whenever you want me back, I'm here, my brother. Who we play? We don't even know. We just found oppositions, and then we're just going to.
One last thing, just very quickly. Obviously, this MVP, most valuable player. We think you're the most valuable player in the game that you're in. So, one last piece of advice for our viewers, just general business, entrepreneurial, motivational advice that you've got to give. Anything.
I'm gonna go super specific just because it's something that resonates with some business that I've had recently. But it is definitely fire fast. One like bad apple can rot your whole fruit basket. So if you see somebody is not doing something right, don't make excuses for them. Just look at it and say, look, get them out of there, get somebody else in, and get somebody that generally believes in your vision and, has the same mentality and ethoses that you do. Because that person is going to poison the rest of the people. So it might turn some of your A players to B players, and you don't want that. So get rid of any bad apples quickly.